Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to open NanoStudio. I've created a demo called Demo Class. No, forget that. I'm going to start a new one. I'm going to create new. I'm going to call it Demo Class 2. Create. Okay, so this takes me back to the home screen. This is the home button up in the top left, the one that's highlighted. Next to it is the song editor button. This one is the mixer window, the mixer button that takes us to the mixer, which imitates a mixer that you would find in a recording studio on an audio console. This is the status bar. Over here is the undo and redo buttons. This is the time signature and tempo and recording buttons. So I'm going to turn this tempo. It defaults to 120 beats per minute. I'm going to just create a demo that's 100 beats per minute, easy to follow along. The metronome is set to play when we're in record mode. Looks like we're set for recording in 1/16th quantization. So it'll quantize the notes to be accurate to within 1/16th note. And then this is the record. This is the go back to the beginning. This is play. And that's the record button on the end. So let's go back to the song editor window. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the instruments that we have chosen. This is a visual timeline, the main mix, which is our overall output. SLT, rock solid, that's a drum kit. Anything that says SLT means slate. That's the brand or the name for anything that's a drum kit in NanoStudio. Down below that we see 3 tracks that start with OBS. OBS is Obsidian. That's their brand name for any kind of synthesized or sampled sound that's not drums. So in this case, we're starting out with deep bass, and we're going to super strings next, and then we have born leader. So by default, we have drums, we have bass, we have strings, or which is a pad sound, a synthesized string, and then we have a lead synth. So if I were to just play a sample of that, I'll click on it. That's what the lead sounds like, born to lead. If I go back and click on super strings, it sounds like this. If I go to the bass, I'll click back to the song editor window, then double click on deep bass, it sounds like this. And so we've got those going. And so let's go back to slate. This is our first job in this assignment is we're going to create a drum track. So I'm going to double click on slate. Slate takes me to a drum. It doesn't look like a keyboard here. It looks like these are called drum pads. So if I play one, the kick drum is the bass drum. It's that thumping sound that we hear. The snare is the one that sounds like a sharper hit. We usually play these, usually a bass drum or a kick drum comes in on the first and third beats in a measure and in a 4/4 time signature, and then the snare comes in on 2 and 4, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, and then over here we have cymbals. These are hi-hat cymbals. This is closed hi-hat. This is a different closed hi-hat, and this is an open hi-hat. You'll hear that it lasts longer. And this is when you play it with a pedal. So the drummer, if it were a real drummer, he could play it with his foot or her foot. So we're going to create a drum track. I'm going to click back to the beginning up here on my transport window. I'm going to click the record button in the top right. So I created a drum pattern that's very repetitious, very simple, but it has what's called a fill at the end. The pattern changes a little. There's a variation in the rhythm at the end of that 4th bar or 4th measure. So if we play it back, let's look at the timeline and play it back. So I'm going back to the song editor. We see these this block of purple. The track is just purple. And we can see some little lines on there. If I double click on it, it takes me to the MIDI editor. And this shows me what the name of the instrument is. Over here on the left, bottom left, it says kick. and then right above it, it says snare. So those are the instruments I played. Kick drum, snare drum, kick drum, snare drum, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare, kick, snare. So it's, if we're starting out on measure 1, there's 4 beats in the measure, 4 notes in the measure. It goes 1, whoop, I didn't want to select it all, but 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we play it back. So there we have that. I'm going to just go back and add a hi-hat track because we always want hi-hats to make it sound. It's going to fill out the top end of our mix. The higher frequencies are going to show up in cymbals. So I'm going to go back to here, double click on the drum kit. I'm going to click like that, a pattern like that. Ready? Record. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I added a little bit of rhythm variation in the 4th measure for the hi-hats as well. So now if we go back and look at this, we'll see the hi-hats are right above the snare. This one I think was a misplayed note, so I'm going to drag that back down to here. I just highlighted it and then use this to move it. I could do that with any of these if I wanted to. All right, so now I've got my drum track, and that's the first part of our assignment for this, this project. Let's make sure this plays back, and then I'll make a demo for part 2.